Greetings, you are the Group 6. The members are Hortelias, Comoda, Lugmao, Malcolm, Macuyo, and Navarro, here to discuss to you the introduction to moral thinking.
So, morality. Morality is the differentiation of intentions, decisions, and actions between those that are distinguished as proper and those that are improper. So, morality is like a trait of our brain which mediates the things we do and judges it if it is right or wrong. A particular system of values and the principles of conduct, especially one held by a specified person or society. Moral issues. A working definition of an issue of moral concern is presented as any issue with the potential to help or harm anyone, including oneself. Moral issues are those which involve a difference of belief and not a matter of preference. On this hypothesis, a moral dispute would involve a factual disagreement or a disagreement in belief, where one or the other or neither belief is correct. It would not involve a disagreement in attitude or a disagreement in feeling. Moral reasoning applies critical analysis to specific events to determine what is right or wrong and what people ought to do in a particular situation. Both philosophers and psychologists study moral reasoning, how we make day-to-day decisions like what should I wear. What should I wear is similar to how we make moral decisions like should I lie or tell the truth. The brain processes both in generally the same way. Moral reasoning typically applies logic and moral theories, such as deontology and utilitarianism, to specific situations or dilemmas. So we have four bases of moral reasoning. Number one is experience. It is practical contact with an observation of facts or events. Number two is common morality. It is the set of moral beliefs shared by almost everyone. We usually think of such precepts like it is wrong to murder, lie, cheat or steal, break promises, harm others physically, and so forth. Personal morality is the personal ethics or personal morality is the set of moral beliefs that a person holds. Our personal belief our personal moral beliefs may differ from common morality in some areas. Now, there are also ethical sensitivities. It is the capacity to decide with intelligence and compassion, drawing on a critical understanding of codes for ethical conduct, clinical experience, academic learning, and ability to anticipate consequences.
Good day. I am David Keith Maura and I am going to report about moral reasoning. First, let us define moral reasoning. Moral reasoning refers to the logical process of determining whether an action is right or wrong. Often one engages in moral reasoning when faced with a decision over what to do, meaning the actions have yet to occur. While some choices are a simpler matter of right and wrong, difficult decisions often require more complex and work and logic to reach a choice and take moral action. So these are the two principles. First, if two cases are fundamentally the same, meaning that any indifferences are irrelevant to the main issue, then both cases should be treated the same. Example: if two people of different ethnicities ask you to hold a door open and there is no difference in the circumstances other than their ethnicity, they should get the same treatment. Either you hold the door for both of them or refuse to help both of them. The next principle is, if two similar cases are not treated the same, it is the burden of the person acting in both cases to prove the situations are different, and thus that the actor has not violated any moral principle. Example: if a person held the door for one person but not the other, they must show that there is a significant difference justification in doing so. This could include information previously not included, such as the first person shares an office with the actor and thus did not need to prove that they should have access to the building. Perhaps the second person was unknown and did not offer to show an ID badge. To be sure, most great philosophers who have addressed the nature of moral reasoning were far from agnostic about the content of the correct moral theory, and developed their reflections about moral reasoning in support or in derivation from their moral theory. Nonetheless, contemporary discussions that are somewhat agnostic about the content of moral theory have arisen around important and controversial aspects of moral reasoning. We may group these around the following seven questions. Number one, how do relevant considerations get taken up in moral reasoning? Is it essential to moral reasoning for the consideration it takes up to be crystallized into or arranged under principles? How do we sort out which moral considerations are most relevant? In what ways do motivational elements shape moral reasoning? What is the best way to model the kinds of conflicts among considerations that arise in moral reasoning? Does moral reasoning include learning from experience and changing one's mind? How can we reason morally with one another? So, what are the empirical challenges? Our thinking, including our moral thinking, is often not explicit. We could say that we also reason tacitly, thinking in much the same way as during explicit reasoning, but without any explicit attempt to reach well-supported answers. In some situations, even the moral ones, we might be ill-advised to attempt to answer practical questions by explicit reasoning. Recent work in empirical ethics has indicated that even when we are called upon to reason morally, we often do so badly. Our thinking about hypothetical moral scenarios has been shown to be highly sensitive to arbitrary variations, such as in the order of the presentation. Even a professional philosophers have been found to be prone to such lapses of clear thinking. Some of our dumbfounding and confusion has been laid at the feet of our having both a fast, more emotional way of processing moral stimuli and a slow, more cognitive way. Lastly, moral insights. In addition to posing philosophical problems, moral reasoning is of interest on account of its implications for moral facts and moral theories. Accordingly, attending to moral reasoning will often be useful to those whose real interest is in determining the right answer to some concrete moral problems or in arguing for or against some moral theory. The characteristic ways we attempt to work through a given sort of moral quandary can be just as revealing about our considered approaches to these matters as are any bottom-line judgments we may characteristically come to. Further, we may have firm reflective convictions about how a given class of problems is best tackled deliberatively, even when we remain in doubt about what should be done.
Next, we'll discuss values, morals, and ethics, and how the three differentiates. Let's start with the etymology of the following words. Values came from the Latin word valere, which means be strong, or be of value. Morals came from the Latin word mos, which means customs. Ethics came from the Greek word ethos, which means character. Values are foundation of a person's ability to judge between right and wrong. Personal values are personal beliefs about right and wrong and may or may not be considered moral. Values are said to be the motives behind a purposeful action. They specify a relationship between a person and a goal. Morals, on the other hand, shapes a person's idea about right and wrong. They are based on our own principles, and morals are the basis of ethics, which means they guide ethical systems. Ethics are said to be, on the other hand, the social system of right and wrong. They are the guiding principles of conduct of an individual or group. Ethics are codes of how to act in a particular setting or profession, such as Code of Ethics for engineers. Going back to values, all values are said to be morally relative or neutral. They have intrinsic worth but are not universally accepted since values are subjective and personal. Values are a deep-rooted system of beliefs. As for morals, a moral person wants to do the right thing, and a moral impulse means best intentions. Morals are highly influenced by external factors, which means they are varying. They are influenced by society, culture, and religion, among others. Ethics is said to be for the survival of the society. Ethics are unwritten law. They are usually considered universal, or which means they are often uniform, unlike values. Ethics is influenced by profession, field, organization, and others, which means ethics is mostly related to professional work. To give a better understanding about the difference of the three, an example would be a person may value honesty over success, and basing on honesty, one of the most common morals is to not participate in cheating. And as for ethics, for us civil engineers, we are supposed to be open and honest with our client, and we must report any changes in the plan along the construction project.
The next topic is about conflicts. Conflicts are collision between general belief systems about morality, ethics, or justice, and their own personal situation. Such conflicts could take place at individual, professional, or societal level. Generally, the cause of conflict is from the clash of differing worldviews. As we know, we all have different values and principles. Therefore, negotiation with people's value will be hard because their values are already solidified. So next is the causes of conflicts. So there are four causes of conflicts. First, functional issue. Second, application issue. Third, conceptual issue. And lastly, moral issue. So first, let's talk about factual issue. It is an issue having to do with the truth or falsehood of factual claims. It is a disagreement over a matter of fact, and this matter of fact is crucial in resolving the problem. In this type of conflict, there is an unknown issue or fact that could cause a conflict. In this example, Engineer X has designed a prototype. However, it can only be approved if it does not affect the environment. Engineer X does not have a method that can determine if his prototype does not affect the environment. If it does not affect the environment, then his prototype will be approved. If he finds out that it is indeed hazardous to the environment, then he has a difficult problem. Here, we can see that Engineer X has a factual issue regarding his prototype, because the unknown fact, which is whether his prototype is hazardous or not, has a crucial bearing on the problem he is facing. Next is application issue. It is a question of whether a concept applies to a given situation. Here, there is confusion whether your moral principles apply in a given situation. So, for example, X, an aerospace engineer, is committed to non-violence. X was hired by his firm to design passenger airplanes, but his boss has recently assigned him to design military fighters. X must decide whether to accept the new assignment or quit and find a new job. So, as we can see in this example, he has a conflict whether his commitment to nonviolence applies to designing military fighters. So, next is conceptual issue. Conceptual issue is a disagreement over a definition of a concept that is crucial in resolving a problem. So this type of issue is very similar to application issue. Most of the time it involves two or more people. So, as we know, all of us has different perception or point of view. Conceptual issue occurs if there is a conflict of perceptions. So, in this example, Engineers may disagree over whether something is a bribe because they have different conception about bribe and how to distinguish one from an acceptable gift. So as we can see in this example, the engineers are in a conflict because they have different perception about bribes. This could be resolved if they will meet in the middle and draw the boundary between a bribe and a gift. So the last issue is moral issue. Moral issue is a question having to do with the relevance or application of one or more principle. Usually, it is a conflict between two or more values or obligation. Actually, in a broad sense, the three issues I have mentioned before falls under moral issue, because basically it is a conflict between two or more values or obligation. Also, usually one will benefit and the others will be compromised. So, for example, Engineer Tom does not want to give the custom officer money, but he needs something to get through the costume to complete a project that is important for the local economy and as well as for his firm. So, as we can see, Tom faces a conflict between his obligation not to pay bribes and his obligation to complete the project. In this scenario, his integrity is being tested, whether he will do the transaction or not. So, as I have mentioned before, usually one will benefit and the other one will be compromised.
Hello, my name is Jason Paul G. Ortelias and I will discuss the three types of inquiry. Inquiries in solving ethical problem. One is factual inquiry, second is normative inquiry, and third is conceptual inquiry. Let's first discuss the factual inquiry or descriptive inquiry. This aims to obtain facts needed for understanding and resolving value-based issues. These facts provide not only the reason for moral problems but also enable us to develop alternative ways of resolving moral problems. Example of this is the engineer has to conduct factual inquiries by using scientific techniques. Another explanation, the inquiry provides important information on business realities and the effectiveness of professional societies in promoting moral conduct, procedures used in risk assessment, and psychological profiles of engineers. Here are some examples of factual inquiry. 1. What are the procedures followed in risk assessment? Second, who conducted the test on materials? Next is normative inquiry. Normative inquiry describes what ought to do under specific circumstances. So what do you mean by this? This means what are the expected ideal response which might differ from what one believes to be right or wrong. Next, quote the laws and procedures that affect the engineering practice on moral grounds. What do you mean by this? This means the laws and procedures refer to the thought process where the moral rights are to be implemented in order to fulfill their professional obligation. Here are some examples of normative inquiry, whose values ought to be primary in making judgment about acceptable risk in design for a public transport system or a nuclear plant. Is it the management, the senior engineers, the government, or the voters, or maybe all of them? Last is conceptual inquiry. In conceptual inquiry, it is directed to clarify the meaning of concepts, principles, and issues related to engineering ethics. Next, conceptual inquiries mention the moral aspect of bribery and how it affects with the professional ethics and professionalism in our works, especially in engineering ethics. Here are some examples of conceptual inquiry. What is meant by safety and what is bribe?
So now I will discuss to you the moral values for engineer, dilemmas or challenges. First is human safety. Safety is described as a freedom from damage, injury, or disease. As a matter of professional practice and as a part of the moral values that engineer must have, safety should be the integral part of any engineering design. It is within the responsibility of an engineer to perform his or her duty while also considering the importance of safety and protecting the public well-being. The moral value of a human safety is the key of offsetting risks that exceed in the field, and it is also a key element in any engineering design. There are ways to ensure human safety. First, engineer design must be compliant with applicable laws and prescribed code. Second, design must meet standards set and accepted of engineering practices. Third, design alternatives that are potentially safer than the current design must be explored further. Fourth, engineer must be aware of potential product misusage by the user, and the design should take this into account to help avoid misusage. And last is prototype and devices for a product should be tested. Second is environment protection. It is a moral value that should be upheld by engineers, especially during our times. Environment protection in engineering sense means helping to identify and develop solutions to environmental problems as well as finding ways for more sustainable means of development of buildings, process, and technologies. Although this is a value that should be upheld, engineer goals are more often than not conflicting. This is because there are ethical dilemmas that result to such conflict, mainly because from the economic requirements of the field going against environmental requirements. The third one is usefulness. Usefulness defined as a degree to which the engineering activity meets the stakeholder expectation. Fourth is economic benefits. Economic benefits are benefits that are valued through money earned such as net income and revenue. It is understandable that this subject is going to be under the moral values of engineering since a lot of money is involved in practice of engineering. It is known that corruption through the form of bribery or fraud. It is being discussed in this regard because its economic benefits can affect the decision making of an engineer and also can be possibly the source of conflict for regards of consideration of safety and adherence of codes. Next, I will discuss the reasonable solution to ethical problem. So for solving ethical problem, it should be the following. First, it should be clear. Second, it should be well informed, and third will be well reasoned. Ethical decision making framework. It is a framework or process that can be followed for solving ethical problem. This framework describes the steps that can be used as a guide for an individual when faced with an ethical dilemma. First, you must recognize that there is an ethical question. It requires you to think about how you should act and what you should do in a given situation. Also, it could involve a choice between a good and a bad outcome. Second, understand the fact of the situation. Requires you to consider how you can learn more about the situation, including making inquiries and finding additional facts to ensure that you have the best possible understanding. Third, understand the option available to you. You need to identify and understand your option. The fourth is understand the consequence of the option. Consider the people involved and how they can be affected because of the problem. Requires you to be aware that your duty is to act in a lawful manner that will put first the interest of the client. Fifth is test the option you plan to make. Consider the possible effect of the option taken. There is a process called ethical problem solving techniques. It consists of employing lower level consideration, finding creative middle way, and making a hard choice. Sixth is explain the option you have decided on those affected and to the other interest parties. Requires you to justify your action in a logical and straightforward manner. Oftentimes, you may need to document or keep record of the issue you had, how you deal with it, and the option you consider, and how you communicate it to the other people involved. 7 is act on the chosen option. Consider how you will implement the decision you chose and carry on with your plan. 8 is, or the last one is, reflect on the outcome. Assess the outcome of your action and what you did learn from the problem. Evaluate if the solution worked and what are the improvements needed to make in the future. So, the conclusion of this framework is for you to understand the method of solving moral and ethical problems, help us to know what we should rightly do in dealing with this kind of situation, Engineers are susceptible to all kind of problem in the field, may it be in relation to design and analysis of a building or like the example given like bribery or other morally questioned acts.